A good Tuesday afternoon to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining us today as we are continuing our walk through history. My name is Nick Angel, and joining me as always is my good friend Alan Seenstrang, and we are just going through the Bible. We began in Genesis a little over a year ago, just reading through the narrative portions of the biblical text and learning what we can about God and what His will is for us. We've been trying to focus a lot on themes and the narrative portions that we see throughout the text. And if you would like to study along with us, maybe you're joining for the first time, then head on to the very beginning of our videos, either here on Facebook or on YouTube, and you can get caught up with us at your own good pleasure, and hope that it will be a blessing to you as you study God's word with us. We're glad to be back after a week off, and we are going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 8, Alan, where there's a strong shift that takes place here within the First Samuel story. Just a brief reminder that we were looking in this text and we were noticing the rise of Samuel and the role that he is playing within Israel as the prophets. We go all the way back to chapter 3, I believe it was. We are told within that text that the word of the Lord was rare and prophetic visions were not widespread. And a lot of that has to do with just the general atmosphere of Israel at this time. A lot of unfaithfulness, a lot of paganism is present within the people. And yet, here is Samuel going to rise up as the great prophet of God. And we read back in chapter 7 and verse 15 that he judged Israel throughout his life. Every year, he would go on a circuit to Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah and would judge Israel at those locations. And then he would return to Ramah because his home was there, and he judged Israel there, and he built an altar to the Lord there. And he's different from the judges that we might remember from the book of the Judges, because instead of being a great warlord, being a fighter, delivering people in that way, his deliverance is coming through a call for the people to repent, for them to turn back to God and to serve him. And yet, being a man, Samuel's only going to be around for so long. And we have to start looking forward to what life is going to be like after Samuel is gone. And unfortunately, we're not giving a very positive outlook on life after Samuel here in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Alan, why don't you go and read for us about uh, the unfortunate nature of Samuel's sons and where that leads the people as far as they're looking towards the future. Who's going to lead us? Who's going to rule over us? And what they decide they want at this point in Israel's history.
Yeah, that's the definitely the interesting part here with Samuel. I mean, he's been completely different from any judge, any priest before him, all the way back to since Joshua and Moses. So he's been better, but he's not without faults as well, and it's mainly with his sons here that kind of causes this issue. In verse 1, it says, "When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges over Israel." We've seen that a lot before. If you think back to, especially a lot of the no name or the judges we don't really know much about. What we do know about them is that they had many sons. The Ibzans and the Elons and the Abdons and the Jairs, all these guys that they had one little blip, one little verse. But usually what was happening was they were basically making themselves kings, and they had a lot of sons that they would appoint over cities. And you still see that a little bit with Samuel. Obviously, he didn't make himself king, but you have kind of a similar thing happening on a smaller scale. Verse 2, his firstborn son's name was Joel, and his second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. You get a sense too. You kind of remember Eli. That's fresh in our minds. And he had two sons, and he kind of left them in charge. And then verse 3, however, his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned toward dishonest profit, took bribes, and perverted justice. So this is unfortunately one bad tie that Samuel does have with Eli, following in those same footsteps. But in verse 4, so all the elders of Israel gathered together, went to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Therefore, appoint a king to judge us the same as all the other nations have." When they said, "Give us a king to judge us," Samuel considered their demand wrong. So he prayed to the Lord. But the Lord told him, listen to the people and everything they say to you. They have not rejected you. They have rejected me as their king. They are doing the same thing to you that they have done to me since the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, abandoning me and worshiping other gods. Listen to them, but solemnly warn them and tell them about the customary rights of the king who will reign over them. So we get the Lord's take on this situation, and you get a little bit of Samuel's take. He thinks this is a rejection of him,
Mm-hmm.
and it is in a way. Of course, it's a rejection of his sons, which they were not good. So this seems like this might be a good idea. Okay, Samuel's old. I just kind of wonder, typically they expected Samuel to pass on the leadership to his sons.
Right.
And for maybe whatever reason, I don't know if they misunderstood or Samuel was giving that impression, which he does name them judges in a way. So we don't know the full extent of what Samuel was doing, or if he obviously, I think he still has great faith in God, but he's a man as well. He wants to continue his line and just like a king would. So there are some aspects of Samuel here. He's acting somewhat like a king. But the bigger picture thing here is, the Lord tells us they have not rejected you. They have rejected me as their king. So they've, you get the sense, the people there, they're not trusting that Samuel or God will take care of them, even with wicked rulers. And, they're not very good people, even with the good influence of Samuel. They're still, the main thing is they're acting just like their fathers did and abandoning God for something else. They're abandoning God for the gods of Egypt, the gods of whoever. Now it's not in the form of a god, but just still trying to be like the other nations and have a king. And God, he gives them their request. He's God in his wisdom. Sometimes he says yes, even though that's probably not what's best for you, but that's what you want, and that's what'll be best in the long run for you to learn your lesson. And God allows that God lets us make our own choices there, and he allows this to happen.
Yeah, what's so interesting about this text is nothing explicitly says that them wanting a king was in and of itself wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound strange because of the rebuke where he says they have rejected not you, Samuel. Samuel's kind of taking it hard. He's kind of in his feelings a little bit, saying, "Oh, they don't want me." Well, Samuel, your kids weren't that great. Joel and Abijah, they're judges in Beersheba, which is way down far south. The influence they're going to have down there is probably not all that strong, and maybe that was purposeful from Samuel because they weren't that great of guys. I mean, they were taking bribes, dishonest gain, perverting justice. That's literally exactly what Samuel was not about. He was somebody who was honest, fair, and trying to do what was right among the people. If they're not the way to go, the people are looking around and saying, "Hey, it's normal mode of operation for people to work through kings, for kings to rule people." And in fact, Alan, if we go back to Deuteronomy 17, it seems to be like this was God's plan all along, that there was a plan for his people to be ruled by kings. And we say that based upon the fact that if you go back to Deuteronomy 17 and you begin reading in verse 14, he prefaces this, Moses does, by saying, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, that take possession of it, live in it, and say, he's anticipating that they're going to want a king. The Lord doesn't say here, no. He doesn't say, no, you can't have a king. But he says, okay, this is going to be the consequence of a king. But at the same time, this is my expectation for the king. Because the king, just like the prophets, just like the judge, just like anybody else who was in a leadership position of Israel, was to be a representative for God and to rule in a way that was God-like, meaning of his character and of his will. So whenever they do that and they say, hey, the Lord says here that I will set a king over me like all nations around me. You are to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. So it's his prerogative on who becomes the king. Appoint a king from your brothers. You are not to set a foreigner over you, or one who is not of your people. However, he must not acquire many horses for himself, or send the people back to Egypt to acquire many horses, for the Lord has told you, you are never to go back that way again. He must not acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart won't go astray. He must not acquire very large amounts of silver and gold for himself. And when he is seated on his royal throne, he is to write a copy of this instruction for himself on the scroll in the presence of all the Levitical priests, and it is to remain with him, and he is to read it from read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to observe all the words of this instruction, and to do these statutes. And then his heart will not be exalted above his countrymen. He will not turn from this commandment to the right or the left, and he and his sons will continue reigning many years in Israel. So there is a blueprint here for royal leadership, for there to be a king. Now, interestingly enough, whenever we think about the kings of Israel, well, we don't get to the third one until all three of these negative things are broken. Solomon, for all of his wisdom, breaks all of these rules. But again, I'm simply showing here that whenever we approach the subject of a king for Israel, you can't take a stand on one side, one extreme or the other, that God wants a king, a human king, no matter what, or that God does not want a human king no matter what. That there is a middle ground here, that there was this provision by the Lord for a king, and yet there was an expectation for what that king was to be like. Now, unfortunately, in this moment, the people are whatever aspect of it that this is, from whatever perspective, whatever angle it is that's inappropriate here, the Lord simply says they rejected me as king. Actually, let me back that up a minute. I think we'll get some further explanation of that in chapter 12. So we'll just pause the button there for a second. Chapter 12 will give us more in-depth explanation of what it means for them to reject God as king. He does tell Samuel here, Alan, beginning of verse 10, that listen, you want this king, you're going to get your king, but it's not exactly going to go swimmingly like you think it's going to go. Alan, why don't you give them the fair warning that Samuel here shares with the people concerning their desire to have a king?
He reminds them of all the negatives here. Verse 10, Samuel told all the Lord's words to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "These are the rights of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and put them to use in his chariots, on his horses, or running in front of his chariots. He can appoint them for his use as commanders of thousands or commanders of fifties, to plow his ground and reap his harvest, or to make his weapons of war and the equipment for his chariots. He can take your daughters to become perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He can take your best fields, vineyards, and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He can take a tenth of your grain and your vineyards and give them to his officials and servants. He can take your male servants, your female servants, your best cattle, and your donkeys and use them for his work. He can take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves can become his servants. When the day comes, you will cry out because of the king you've chosen for yourselves, but the Lord won't answer you on that day." Mm-hmm. The people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, "We must have a king over us. Then we'll be like all the other nations. Our king will judge us, go out before us, and fight our battles." And Samuel listened to the people's words and repeated them to the Lord. Listen to them. The Lord told Samuel, "Appoint a king for them." Then Samuel told the men of Israel, "Each of you go back to your city." So it's you get a more clarification here. I think, we must have a king over us. And what do they want from that? They don't mind all of the negatives. They're not thinking about that in the long run. They're thinking about a king to judge us, go out before us, and fight our battles. So, the Lord, they don't think the Lord's been fighting their battles for them good enough. So, and which part of that is true, because they've not been worthy of it. We've seen times when they've gone out and been defeated. Well, it's clearly nothing to do with God. It's the fact that they had sin. They hadn't, they weren't good. So God was not with them in those battles. And when they came back to him in chapter 7, um, they had victory. So that's it's not that the Lord, it's not that this is true. It's just true in their eyes, and they're willing to. What's funny is they're willing to basically become servants to this king, which is no different than their status to the Philistines and they're giving up parts of their crops to these other oppressive nations, and they're losing their daughters and their sons to war and battles and whatever. And it's no different with the king. It's just it seems better than where they're at now. If they just would just trust in God, then they could have had a better situation. And they don't listen to Samuel, obviously. So God gives them their request.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like kids a lot. Kids want this or they want that, and because of our wisdom as parents and just experience and knowing how things work, we know we know that it's not good for a kid to eat 10 pieces of candy at 9 o'clock at night right before bedtime. That's just not going to end well. And yet kids sometimes are still going to beg and plead or go behind your back and get what they want, and they ended up suffering for it. It doesn't turn out very well. And that's what the Lord is doing here. He knows exactly how this is going to go. He says six times he will or he can take. He's going to take. And yet what we see once we get to verse 19 is the people refuse to listen to this. They have hard hearts, and they're saying, no, he's not going to take. He's going to do. He's going to go out before us. He's going to deliver us. He's going to fight our battles. There's just a complete misconception of what it's going to be like for these people to be ruled by a king. And that gets to a couple of the issues that I see here within this chapter, Alan, is the people, they instead of relying upon God more, instead of humbling themselves before God more, instead of turning from their wickedness and from their paganism to God and God delivering them of their struggles, instead of renewing their hearts, they just want to try to change the strategy. So instead of just being what they ought to be from the start, they're going to say, hey, we're going to go in a different direction, instead of get to the real root of the issue, which is their hearts and their rejection. We see the hard hearts here. They refuse to listen. No, we must have a king over us. We must have that. And the Lord says, all right, do that. Appoint a king for them. And they ask for it, and now they're going to get it. And while there are certainly high points of them being ruled by kings following this text here, there are some low points as well. There's some really bad things that the kings do because they simply have the authority to do so. And everything that's talked about here, taking your sons, taking your daughters, taking your fields, taking a tenth of your grain, taking your male servants, taking your flocks, all this is going to happen. And it just, you ask for it. You asked for it, and now you're going to get it. And the reality is soon going to hit home for sure for these people here as we continue the story of Israel.
One thing I do wonder, and this is actually a question, like I haven't quite figured this out yet. I mean, it talks about in Deuteronomy, it predicts that the people would ask for a king, and it predicted that they would ask in this way, that they may be like other nations.
Right.
But even before that, like Jacob, when he blesses the 12 tribes, he talks about Judah and having the scepter, kind of a reference to the kingly line coming through him. And of course, God promised Abraham that kings would come from his line.
Right. Genesis 16, I think.
Yeah. So I've been trying to figure out, like, I wonder if the plan, if God's ideal plan was to have a king, or if, from the beginning, like I would assume David would be the goal. So if he planned from the beginning to have a king, and it would be David, this king he brought up, then if that's the case, then that it's a little bit sad here, because if they just waited one more generation, God had a king waiting for them. They just it wasn't coming just yet. Just like, and he does that in many different things. Like
Yeah.
the best example I can think of is like the sexual relationship that a man and a woman has. Like that's a good thing, but you have to wait for it for a level of maturity and also a marriage. So it's, you gotta get to a certain point in your life to be able to enjoy that properly. So the Israelites are the same. They're still immature. They weren't ready for a king, but they're asking for a king too early, too soon.
Mhm.
So I've wondered if that's the case, or if there was, if everything had gone perfectly, they never would have had a king until Christ came. It would have just been, you know judges, or they would have kind of the Levites would have been the leaders for the all. As I mean, I'm assuming that everything went perfectly. The Israelites were always good, and they never asked for a king. They never rebelled. They never did wicked, and it was just they were ruled by the Levites all those times. I've always kind of wondered that if this was just I guess a deviation from the plan, which God does that. I mean, he probably had an ideal, and then his plan's still going to go even if we take it a different direction. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. That was just something I still haven't figured out about the kings here.
The way I will lean on that is I will lean towards kings being a part of the plan from the beginning.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, going back to Abraham, is not chapter 16, maybe it's 15. I haven't been able to pinpoint the text you're talking about, but yes, it is told of Abraham that kings will come from you. Like that is how great your family is going to be, to the extent that kings are going to come from you. That put together with Deuteronomy 17, and the fact that there is not just, again, it's not just the permission to have kings or the foretelling to have kings, but there is the standard that the king is to live up to. The fact that that is mentioned there tells me that, yeah, I think kings always were a part of God's plan. But just like the family of Abraham, just like the nation of Israel, those things were to be carried out in a particular way according to God's design and His will. And maybe it was. I get what you're saying there, and I think that's some good thinking, that maybe they just wait a little bit longer. And then there's David, because you just think about the difference between Saul and David, and what stands out to me so much between the two individuals, and what's spoken about is God looking upon the inner person of David, as opposed to the people, as we're going to see with Saul. They just see the outward person. They just see this big, strong man who, that's obviously going to be our warrior king, our soldier king, who's going to be able to deliver us from the oppression of the Philistines. Well, then you look at David, and that's not, David is not as an impressive figure as Saul is. And yet David's inner person was a person after God's own heart. Not to say that he was perfect. We know that certainly isn't the case, but he was truly a man after God's own heart. And he set the standard for what the king of Israel ought to be like, which is why whenever we think of the Messiah coming, the Christ coming, Jesus coming, that he is referred to as a son of David. And he's going to come and sit on the Davidic throne. Why? Because David set the standard, and he showed this is what the expectation is. He failed that in some extents, which is what Jesus is going to be able to come to do, and to show the perfect standard. But yeah, I do think that this is always something that God was wanting, which is why we don't need to take this chapter and conclude simply that the people wanting the king was wrong. I don't think that's accurate. It is more the fact that they're not relying upon God. They're not being patient for God's time to work
Mhm.
out. That they're not looking to Him for deliverance in these moments whenever they are oppressed. And again, I think chapter 12 is going to give us a good insight into this attitude of the people, and how it has shown them, and how it is going to be shown as being a cyclical problem for them. It's going to be something that they have shown time and time again. Whenever trouble arises, instead of turning to God, they want to turn to people, or
Mhm.
they don't trust in God as they ought to in the moment of struggle. And here's a moment where there's trouble. The people, the two sons of Samuel, the two sons of Samuel aren't good guys. So instead of waiting upon the Lord and allowing Him to work things out, they say, "Hey, you know what? We got the idea. We got the solution. Just give us a king right now, like the other nations, and we'll be good. If they would just pump the brakes a little bit, then God would have worked things out okay. Maybe they wouldn't have had to go through this ordeal with Saul and how sadly and horrifically it ended. But yeah, good question there. Good thoughts, and I think I hope that this will help us maybe to see this text in a different light instead of just throw the blanket. They should not have ever wanted a king. Maybe not so much when you look at the text holistically, and I think that's one of the benefits of a study like this,
Mhm.
Alan, is the fact that we started all the way back in Genesis and we've seen God working through Abraham. We've seen it working through his family and bringing us up here to the time of Israel and the time of the kings here. And we're able to kind of put these pieces together to see a more holistic view of what the plan of God has been instead of just taking this one chapter and say, well, they were never supposed to have a king that displeased God. Not so much. I think we could see it's a little bit deeper than just saying, "Hey, they weren't supposed to want a king." Alan, what do you have to finish us up today as we finish looking at this text and look forward to Friday's study in First Samuel chapter 9, where Saul comes into the picture.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's we're gonna see that. Well, this book is full of contrasts. Like we've seen, kind of like Eli versus Samuel at the beginning, and then we're really the rest of this book's going to be um, comparing Saul and David,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of interesting. You usually have the bad, the one, then the better one, and then Saul's going to be the bad king, and David's going to be the better king. So um, it's almost like that's a microcosm of the entire Bible too. You have the entire Old Testament full of you have good and bad characters, but definitely not perfect in any way. And
Definitely no
then when you have
Jesus.
that new covenant with Christ, you
Right.
finally have that that you finally have that David, that Samuel that comes in here, but even better than all the ones before him. So it kind of makes sense that the bad comes first before the good, because then we appreciate that good so much more. If the good comes
Mhm.
first, we don't appreciate it. We're always looking to, the grass is greener on the other side. We're looking past it. But if we've seen tough times, if we've seen something worse, then when something better comes, we can appreciate it more and we recognize it more. So, so that's I think another reason why Christ came when he did, and not 2 days after the fall of man back in Genesis chapter 3. I mean, there was, just like the Israelites, they needed a level of maturity and understanding. I mean, the people had to be ready for him, and it was in the fullness of time, when they were ready, that's when Christ came. So that's
You know,
it.
waiting on the Lord
Hmm.
certainly is a good thing to keep in mind. I'll just read a text on this idea. It's one of my favorite texts of scripture is Isaiah 40. This idea of waiting and to wait on the Lord is to trust in the Lord. We sing a song about that idea.
I was singing it
And,
already.
oh yeah,
I
it's
was
in our
singing
head
it
for
on.
sure. In Isaiah 40, in verse 28, the questions are asked: Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary, and there is no limit to his understanding. He gives strength to the faint, and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary, and the young men stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord, or those who wait on the Lord, will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. And that certainly is. These are some words that the Israelites probably could have done well to consider at this moment, at this moment in their history, where they're wondering, where are we going to go next? Are we going to follow the bad leadership of Samuel's sons? Is God going to raise up for us another prophet? What is God going to do? They would have done well to just wait on the Lord, to trust in the Lord, and to allow Him to work things out as He pleased. But instead, they wanted a king right here, right now. And because of their insistence and because of their hard hearts, God's going to give them a king. He also gives them a fair warning. It's not going to go exactly as you hope that it would. We're going to continue the story of Israel's history on Friday as we get into 1 Samuel chapter 9, where Saul is introduced into the story. Hope that you could join us for that, and hope that this study and text is this study in this text has been good for you. Hope that you reminded yourself to wait on the Lord, and don't simply look for a new strategy or something new to do. Maybe the thing to do at a particular moment is just for us to change our hearts, to humble ourselves before God, and to do just what he would have us to do from the get-go. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. May God bless you in all that you do. I hope you join us next time as we continue our walk through history, the story of God's word as revealed to us within the Bible. Take care. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.